One of the questions that I often get and the doubts that I see in people's minds is, well, but I'm not the CEO, I'm not the HR director. There are all these senior executives in my organization whose behavior is, not what you would want, and it doesn't look like anyone's going to get rid of them. And so, realistically, what can I do? I'm running a team in the middle of the organization, or I'm, an HR person somewhere down the organization. What actually can I do? So the first thing is, are you role modeling it yourself? So that is extremely important. It's very easy when you see other people, in a sense, you're sitting in an organization where these role models are sending the messages about behaving in a certain way. It's easy for you to go along with that behavior and say, well, I can't change because they're not changing. So one of the things, I think the first things, is to actually look at your own value set. What really matters to you? Is it okay that you live in the way that you're living, or do you need to really take a stand on some things? So there's a lot of personal development work that I encourage people to do to get clear on who they are and what the signals are that they're sending. So that's the first piece. The second piece then is to gradually build the business case. So the book does, I think it's in chapter 4-5, help individuals or teams to actually demonstrate quite clearly what the cost is. So, examples, there are some great examples of where there was not collaboration, where there was not a one-team culture. And so because one group wasn't communicated to the other group, for example, a whole new advertising campaign is put out, but the people in the call centers never heard about it. So when the customers start ringing up, they've got nothing to say. So, that's just a tiny example, but it's quite easy. And then you can quite easily measure the difference between the aspired sales that were going to come out of that campaign and what actually happened, because etc. So it's quite easy to start building that. So gradually you start to build some momentum and some credibility for the business case for doing this. So that's step 2. Then, of course, the biggest step is to have an individual leader see that their behavior is influencing the culture. And I have found that one of the most effective ways of doing that, if you can pull it off, is to actually get support for some form of 360. And I just holding up the mirror in that way, to give you an example, you can have a leader who wants customer centricity, who genuinely is saying we want to be customer centric. And yet that individual is not open to receiving bad news from the front line. So the very place, the people who are the closest to the customer, that person isn't getting the information. So obviously they're not going to be able to make those big decisions of investment dollars and so on, which are going to make the difference to building an organization that is more pleasing for the customer. So I have found, on the occasions where I have been able to sit in front of a leader and say, this is the strategy that you said you wanted. This is how people see your own behavior. And this is the culture that you are therefore creating. And this is how it's impacting the fact that your inability to achieve that culture. So really in 2 sentences, to be able to say, if you don't listen, you're not going to get the revenue from the customer. And I can build that story now. And that's pretty impressive. Now, the last step, of course, is, can that person change? And that's a bigger question. And that takes time. And that's where all the investment goes. But at least the point of, yes, I want to change, which is, the starting point. I had a really good time with Random House, the publisher, when they were designing the cover. And that's late in the process. So a publisher doesn't think about the cover until the book is just about finished. And what they asked me is, tell me a couple of the key stories in the book. And the cover that they came up with is this guy who's walking up this, higgledy-piggledy staircase. And it comes from a story that I tell in the book, which is that as you go through what I call a culture journey, it feels very higgledy-piggledy. It doesn't feel like it's a straight line. You often can't tell whether this particular path, this step that you're taking is going to work or not. But then when you get to the end, or no, I won't say the end because you never get to the end in culture, but when you get, say, 4 or 5 years down the track and you look back, you can actually see that there was a line, a line that you were taking, even though when you were in the middle of it, you couldn't necessarily see that. So this guy is sort of sitting in the staircase, and he may not be able to see that end place. But what the purpose of this book is to provide something of a handrail. So that as you're going up this I have kind of pictures of Lord of the Rings and, some of the mountains of Mordor where they were kind of climbing through this thing and they didn't know where they were going. And I want to provide a handrail which says, well, you may not be able to see where this is going, but these are things that a whole lot of other people have done. This is what you can try. This is how it will work. So people get more confident not to give up because, it's easy sometimes to say this is just too hard. The other thing I love about the culture, the book, is the colours, I must confess, because I can sit in an office, somebody's office who I haven't met before, and I can see the other side of the room on their bookshelf. Everyone has bookshelves behind them, whether or not they've got this book, because it's such a great colour, this colour combination, the blue and the black on the spine is pretty strong. So it's my little kind of private thing. Oh, okay, he's read my book. That's kind of nice. Or, she doesn't seem to have it. Okay. So I was really pleased. It was a delight working with Random House. They've been great.